Okay, Jerry, you're on.
Hey, thank you, Mary, and welcome everyone to tonight's first call. It's something new that we're starting here at Discovery Toys, a speaker series. And as those who have been on for a few minutes, we know we have Dr. Bozeday, who's one of our advisors, and she's going to be speaking tonight. Jim Garber is actually going to give her the introduction. But I wanted to welcome you to Discovery Toys. We opened this call up to not only team members, but gave you the opportunity to invite friends and insiders to learn a little bit about what we do here at Discovery Toys. And this is our 40th anniversary, and we are rock solid with the mission that the company was founded on, making a difference in the lives of children. And that's what we're devoted to, and that's what our advisory board is devoted to, and all the great people that are part of Discovery Toys, from home office to all our consultants. It's really a great group, and they're passionate and they're driven by what they do. And one of the things that you learn about Discovery Toys is that it's a very very close-knit community that we have here, and people are always willing to share and learn from each other. And something that we're extremely proud of, and I want to give it just a second here, is this Easter basket program that we have. And it's just been overwhelming to see what the response has been, and people who have gone out and have raised funds locally and have made Easter baskets. I mean, I've been seeing so many great pictures posted, and they're going to be posted on our website and the regular EC corporate page, Facebook as well. It's on the internal pages now, but the number has to be in the thousands of children who are going to benefit from the efforts of our educational consultants who have gone out there with this program that has been growing year after year, and bring some light into brightness into children who don't have the idyllic childhood experience that that others have. There are a lot of children who are living in shelters, who are in just difficult circumstances. So very proud of our team members, and it's part of what we do here at Discovery Toys. We invite you to learn more about Discovery Toys, our website, if you're not a team member yet. And tonight will be a great example of what we do. We just don't hustle recipes here and at Discovery Toys. We do something that's important, and our people do something that's important. And there's nothing more valuable. There's no more valuable asset than the children in our society and their future. And that's what we're here to help and make our contribution. And tonight, Dr. Bozeday is going to give us some insights. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim Garber because he's scheduled to do her introduction. But welcome, everyone, to our call.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, it's my utmost pleasure to introduce to you all Dr. Giorgia Bow, who is the Director of Educational Services at the Rush Neurobehavioral Center. The Rush Neurobehavioral Center is part of the Rush Medical Center in the greater Chicago area. And the Rush Neurobehavioral Center focuses on serving the medical, psychological, and educational needs of children with brain-based learning and behavioral challenges, and works to help those children build on their strengths to help them achieve their full potential. Now, with more than 30 years of experience in the education area prior to joining the Rush Neurobehavioral Center, Dr. Bozeday developed a great understanding in how to develop programs to help teachers help students. Her areas of expertise include executive functioning, gifted education, social-emotional curriculum development, character education programming, and as I mentioned, curriculum design and implementation. Now, her association with the Rush Neurobehavioral Center also affords Dr. Bozeday convenient access to the latest in neuroscience related to learning. And many of us have the pleasure to experience and meet with Dr. Bozeday when she spoke at our convention 3 years ago. And she continues to serve us, the Serve Discovery Toys community, as a member of our advisory board. So without further ado, Dr. Giorgia Bozeday.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. It's always a little humbling to be introduced, and I very much appreciate it. I also very much appreciate my association with Discovery Toys, the organization, and I welcome all of you. Some of you I've met and I know through the convention 3 years ago, and others I probably had some contact with through a past webinar that I did for Discovery Toys. So I have very much enjoyed my association with you all. and I welcome you to tonight's informational session. So before I start, though, I want to begin here with a little story, and I'm going to give a shout out to Betty Jo. I think Betty Jo is there. Betty Jo was in charge of the exhibit at the Illinois Association for Gifted Children's conference back in February, and I was presenting on their Saturday Parent Day. And as I was setting up my chairs, my PowerPoint, getting ready, Betty Jo appeared in the doorway, big smile, big greeting, and I remembered instantly what makes the Discovery Toy organization so wonderful. It is the emphasis on the people, on the relationships, on the interpersonal skills, which were just evident immediately when Betty Jo stepped through the door. So I thank you for that. It was a wonderful greeting, and it's a great segue into what we're going to do in the next 25, 30 minutes together, because that theme of interpersonal, of relationships, of the way we relate to each other in real time is actually the theme that carries us through the research that we're going to talk about this evening. So let's begin. Many of you who know me know that I always start by talking about something having to do with executive function skills. That is my main role here at Rush Neurobehavioral Center. We build curriculum for executive function skills. And so it's important that we talk about the executive function skills. And as you look down this list, this is the list that we use that of executive function skills that are most closely associated with academic performances. You may have a favorite item on this list. I know some people settle on goal-directed behaviors, setting the goals, achieving your goals. That's, of course, a hallmark of executive function skills. Some of you might be scanning down and looking at time management or self-regulation, which is an area of great study, not only in the past, but especially now currently. I will get to that in a little bit. Some of you are maybe settled on problem-solving strategies, focusing, maintaining attention. All of these are critical to executive function skills. Others of you may be looking carefully at that social skills development component. And I just wanted to go through these briefly because they all relate to the research we're going to talk about tonight. And they all relate to what's important in terms of our interpersonal skills and interactions and the way in which young children learn best. So we'll come back to these, never fear. In fact, we're coming back now because the Harvard study that came out in 2011 looked at executive function skills within categories. So you see the first one is inhibitory control. We tend to call that self-regulation. The key piece of this is impulse control, self-discipline, the ability to resist distractions. Our world is filled with distractions constantly, 24/7. And the idea that we are able to ward off distractions, to see distractions as getting in the way of our functioning is a critical component of executive function skills. Working memory, as you can imagine, as it says, to hold and manipulate information over short periods of time. It enables us to access various pockets or buckets of learning as we need them. And finally, mental flexibility. The key pieces that I look at within this that are highlighted in the Harvard study are priorities, the ability to set priorities, and understanding perspectives. So if you're looking at ways to group the previous list and look at it within the setting of the Harvard study, this would be the way we would regroup that list. So you see how things fit under self-regulation, how they fit under working memory, and how they fit under flexibility and adaptability. And by the way, I always have to comment that you see that little brain moving there with the weights. So the brain is not a muscle, it's an organ. However, there are characteristics about the brain that are similar to that of a muscle, and that the main idea here is that the areas that you use within your brain are the ones that develop more complex networks, the ability to understand more complex ideas. Areas that you do not emphasize will not develop in that same complex way. So this is this is a concept that I'm going to come back to in a little bit. All right, so one last piece of research that has a more general or overarching application has to do with the idea of pairing gestures and language, incorporating movement, and promoting dramatic and imaginative play. And these are findings that come out of early, especially early childhood development. And you see how nicely these go together with the executive function skills, and also how much interaction there is among these. So for instance, you could look at incorporating movement, and you could say, well, doesn't that go with pairing gestures and language? Absolutely. Or you could say, I think movement also goes with imaginative play, acting out a script. So these are the areas that lay the groundwork for some of the new findings that we're going to talk about in more depth. Let's take a look at some of that additional Harvard research that shows this very steep curve of development, beginning at birth, going all the way up till about 8 or 10. You can follow that. This is a peak period in a child's life for them to develop executive function skills. Never again in a child's life will there be this steep learning curve. These findings that came out of Harvard are so important to early childhood education. So you look at this graph, and then you also look at the one coming after that. It has to do with 3 additional areas. Now, higher cognitive functioning, the red line, would go along with executive function skills. But if you look at, concurrently, if you look at the yellow line, which is sensory development, and the blue line, which is language development, it's very, very clear how important those first months. In fact, if you notice, many of the lines begin in utero, prenatally, at 2, 3, 4 months before birth. Sometimes I'll run into parents who will say to me, I don't understand why talking to my baby is important before they actually can speak. And then I'm so grateful that I have this research that I can point out, because all of that language acquisition before that first mama or dada occurs happens prenatally to about the 1 year or 1 year and a month. Somewhere in that span, before that first word, all of that language input is impacting what the child is learning. Also, you look at that steep curve for sensory pathways and vision and hearing development. Again, it just shoots up right at birth. Now, I don't want anyone to interpret that when the lines are going downward, that it means there's a decline in these abilities. That's not the case. What it's indicating is that the rate of development is slower. In fact, our brains continue developing in these areas all of our lives, depending on what we expose ourselves to and how active we are. I'll just throw this in for those of you who are maybe approaching middle life, we'll say. There's kind of the trifecta now that we know that keeps our brains healthy and functioning well. And it has to do with continuing to be physically active, continuing to be interested in learning, cognitively active. And the last, maybe even more importantly, is the social activity, continuing to be socially active. So those are just the trio that keeps us going. And if you look closely at what is happening with a young child, very similar areas: sensory pathways, motor pathways, language development, and then cognitive. Language, of course, having a great deal to do with social interaction. So you might say to yourself, wow, we're really emphasizing the importance of early childhood, the importance of the first year, first 2, 3, 4 years of life and development, and what happens during that time. And if that's what you're saying to yourself, you are right on the money. Let's take a look to underscore that at brain development. So this is kind of a fun slide. The blue shows a longitudinal view of how the brain develops from the ages of 5 to 20. This study was first reported in 2004. It began in the mid-80s, 1980s, because that was the first time we had the technology so that we could actually conduct a study like this. Now, it's pretty cool. You love looking at it. But the really important data that comes from this is this picture of the brain at different ages. And since we're talking about young children, let's focus on that far side there where it says 5, meaning 5 years, the age line. And you'll notice if you look at the brain of a 5-year-old, you will see that the back part is fully mature. That is the sensory area. Remember vision and hearing in that previous chart with the yellow line. That's also movement, balance, and so on. And then along with that, the blue strips in the middle have to do, they're called the sensory cortex and the motor cortex, and they very much correspond with these early areas of development. The bottom line is you cannot stop a young baby slash toddler slash tot from moving, nor should we. Because moving is the way that those young little people find out about the world. It is critical that they are able to move through their environment, that they are able to perfect their motor skills, that they are able to pick things up that they are interested in and exploring. And you, of course, you know where those things go immediately, in the mouth. And the reason for that, by the way, is that the sensory cortex here for children under about 2.5 is entirely devoted to areas of the mouth. So when they put things in their mouths, they're actually getting a lot of information about the object that they're holding. It's not so much what they're getting tactily, but what they're getting through that sensory cortex that is devoted to areas of the mouth. So we know so much more now. And then as these young children develop, they're exploring, they're touching, they're moving. We all know the stages, right? They're rolling, they're up on all fours, they're rocking, they're scooting, and then they're pulling themselves up. And those of us who have children know at that point, you gotta just make sure everything is nailed down because they are off and running, literally. Do you know a baby? This was so interesting. I went to this presentation. It is said that a baby has about 200 tries before it is able to get a baby of around a year, before it's able to get a series of steps to walk. And during all those times that they're falling, never once do they say, oh, this is too hard. I think I'll give up, right? It's because A, they're driven to move, and B, they have not yet learned that failure is bad. In fact, we are born to benefit from mistakes. And that's how we learn pretty much at a young age to do almost anything. So I'm veering a little into some of the research in growth mindset, which we're not going to spend a lot of time with tonight. But if you're interested, it's Dr. Carol Dweck's work out of Stanford University. Fascinating stuff. All right, now I am going to pose what I believe to be a fairly controversial point. And I want you to react to this, to think about it. What could I possibly mean by this? Inadvertently, our child care practices of the 21st century are restricting our children's abilities to explore their world. Now, we've just established how important that is. And now what are we doing? We're actually curtailing our children's ability to explore in the ways that are most meaningful. So I hope I've got some of you saying, no, we aren't doing that. Couldn't possibly be doing that, because I'm going to show you what I mean very shortly. First of all, let me just show you some of the research from Adele Diamond, University of British Columbia. This research is actually very similar to research conducted on older children as well. Executive function skills are ranked by kindergarten teachers as the most important component for school readiness. They more strongly correlate with reading and math proficiency than IQ, due to, and this is the part the Harvard study added, the use of working memory, and key to this, the ability to filter out distractions that lead to unfocused behavior. All right, so I hope you've been contemplating what's going on, because I'm about to give you some pretty stark data. This is very, very recent research. Look what's happening to our children in terms of use of screen time. Children under the age of 8 have increased their screen time from 15 minutes a day in 2013 to 48 minutes a day in 2017. I'm hoping, I can't hear you, but I'm hoping some of you are gasping. Look at the next one. 48% of children under 8 years old have their own electronic devices, increased from 7% in 2013. And the implication here is that they're able to use them at will. Children 8 and younger now spend, this one is very hard for me to read. I will. Now spend more time on mobile screens than they do reading or being read to. I mean, this should cause us all to sit up. And then I have saved, probably not the best, probably the most alarming for last. Sorry, there it is. Babies under the age of 1 average 90 minutes of screen time every day. Oh my heavens. And if you look at the outcomes that are associated through research with these data points, language and learning, academic delays are becoming significant in a large percentage of our population. Social, emotional, and behavioral problems are increasing. All this screen time is certainly a factor in childhood obesity when children get older, but not too much older. Those rates are going up quickly in young children as well. And the last one is that sleep patterns are disrupted. That's for 2 reasons, at least 2. The brightness of the screen is confusing to the brain in terms of sleeping. The brain is asking, is it daytime? Is it nighttime? I'm not sure. And the other piece of this is that when a young child, actually anyone, engages in something online, something that's streaming through the screen, it activates and stimulates the brain that in such a way that does not prepare it for sleeping. We'll put it that way. So I'm going to ask you another question here. With so much media time, what kinds of things are getting shortchanged? And I'm guessing right now you're generating a number of answers. Things such as, and we've talked about this a bit, right? Movement, physical activity. Social emotional learning, social skills. There was a recent study, as an aside, with adolescents that showed that the adolescents that had spent the most time, had the highest rates of screen time over a period of years, were the poorest in solving social issues because they hadn't practiced. All right, next item, speech and language development. No surprise there. A screen will not develop speech and language skills. Why is that? Because it is not reciprocal. There is no give and take. There is no learning through speaking, through having an adult there imitating and giving back in response, and then having the child try again. Some of you know that I was a speech therapist in my beginning of my career, so once a speech therapist, always a speech therapist, and these kinds of research findings are fascinating to me. Problem-solving skills, creativity, play is the best predictor of one's ability to solve problems and be creative. Play means interactive, real-time, usually interpersonal play. Also, going along with that, family time, communication, community. Again, coming back to Discovery Toys, I am so often struck by the sense of community among this organization. Unfortunately, our children are experiencing that sense of communication and community to a far less extent than they were even 5, 6 years ago. And the last one is sleep, and we've already covered that. So you kind of see where things are going here in terms of the information that I'm presenting. We are seeing now that these are the areas that our children are having much less exposure to. We've already talked about how the brain develops based on the things that it is that's given to it, that's in front of it, experience, circumstance, and need. Now let's take a look at the American Association of Pediatrics recommendations relative to screen time. They've changed this a little bit. It used to be they would state that children under 2 should have no, 0, absolutely none exposure to any kind of screen, handheld devices, computers, TV, whatever. They've softened that which causes me quite a bit of concern. Now they're saying very limited screen time. You see the other words that are underlined, stipulating that that screen time should be what's called co-viewing, with talking and teaching. That means interaction going on. If you look down into the 18 to 24 months, now they're emphasizing high quality programming, avoiding solo media use. And then you see with children 2 to 5, again, they're upping the time of screen time, but they're also emphasizing co-view and co-play. Now this just sounds lovely, doesn't it? Yes, indeed. I'll be sitting with my, in my case, my grandson, and we'll be looking at the screen, and maybe we're going to be reading a book on the screen, and he and I are enjoying a story together. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Oh, you know what's coming. Well, it turns out that much of the research that we're now seeing in early childhood is continuing with even a louder voice to emphasize the importance of experience as the foundation for learning, that learning by doing comes first. You see that quote by Nicholas Carr from his book, The Shallows. Our brains change based on experience, circumstance, and need. So even though it sounds delightful that I would be able to sit with my grandson and read a book on his electronic device, it actually doesn't work that way. This study Dr. Sosa put out, it was published in 2015 in JAMA. She specifically set about studying the claim made by many software and hardware organizations that reading a book on an electronic device, playing games on an electronic device, appropriate to age levels, is just the same, produces just the same results as if you are sitting with a book physically, turning pages and discussing it. So she wanted to measure that, and this is the results of her study. It's pretty clear. Books and traditional toys were superior to play, with electronic toys in promoting high-quality communication. Language development showed superior growth of books and traditional toys. The next two are the ones that just strike at my heart. Children and parents use less language when playing with electronic toys, and language development decreased with these types of toys. Play with electronic toys was associated with a decrease in quantity and quality of language input, meaning by the parents, as well as the output by the children. And it should be discouraged as a way to promote early language development. This applies to books used electronically as well. I never will forget the passage in this study where the parents were reporting sitting with their children, the ones in the study with the electronic devices, and reading the book Clifford the Red Dog. Now, this is one of my favorite book series. I have all of them. I read them to my 2 sons and to many of the students that I've taught over the years. They described sitting with an electronic device with Clifford the Red Dog loaded in and literally having to hold their children's hands to keep them from just mechanically swiping through the different screens to get to the one that had a button they could push that made a sound. They reported that it was so frustrating because they couldn't have any of the normal exchanges. Things like, what do you think is going to happen next? Oh, what is Clifford feeling? What would he want to say if he could talk? What is he thinking here? Oh, he's in a lot of trouble now. What's going to happen? These are the kinds of interactions that we have with our kids when we are reading a story to them with a paper book, a physical book. When we are playing with toys where we can get into, remember the imaginative play? Where we can get into imaginative play with them, we can create stories, we can help prompt them to create stories. It's not just language development. It relates to all areas of executive function skills. So we're going to conclude now with 3 studies, 3 slides, 6 studies. The first 2 studies, unfortunately, continue that theme of electronic devices and what happens. So this study, which came out in 2015, showed that very likely what happens when kids spend a segment of time, I don't believe it was even that long, 20 minutes, I believe, with an electronic device, they are using up their working memory, their ability to inhibit distractions, their cognitive shifting, that means being able to move back and forth between ideas and thoughts. They're using that up so that when they finish with that electronic viewing, they are unable to connect in a short-term way with those executive function skills. Now, I'm going to use this example. This was not in the study. But I remember clearly, and this is with TV because it goes back a ways, but it's no different with the screen because I've seen it with my grandson. I remember after one of my sons, both my sons would have watched TV for about 20 minutes, and then I would turn the TV off and they would look at me in a very dazed manner, and for a period of time actually unable to come and relate very well. And I saw this happen time after time. I finally ended up banning any TV watching in the morning, because I knew that that was not helping prepare them for school, where they needed to use their cognitive skills. They needed to have that working memory intact. They needed to be able to inhibit distractions. So I think that study is, I feel like I have a real life example of that study, but I think it's a very important one. And the second study also suggested that the more, and this is with infants and toddlers and preschoolers, the more time they spend in front of a screen, when it replaces live interactions, the more at risk they are for development. And it's that key piece of replacing live interactions. But based on the study that I've reported previously, it's almost impossible to recreate what our children get out of us playing with them, with traditional toys and books. Luckily, these next two studies are much more uplifting, and pay attention here because it's going to lead us into a question that I'm going to pose to you in just about a minute when I'm finished with this part of our discussion. So recent studies demonstrate that pretend play in young children develops executive function skills, especially related to attention, rule-making, and planning, very key to learning. And the second study, with 100 preschoolers, assigned a group to creating pretend script and then acting it out. Now remember how we said imaginative play, movement, gestures, all of those things promote these areas of executive functioning. Well, it was that group of preschoolers that made the greatest gains in executive function skills, and they compared them to a control group that did not have any play type activity and another group that had play activities but without the imagination, the creativity. And then finally, we see, and this study is extremely important when we are looking at surveying populations that are not as privileged, populations of students that don't have the benefits that many of our other students have. In my work here at Rush Neurobehavioral Center, I'm always looking for funding so that I can bring programs into underserved populations. So this study is extremely important to the work that I'm always attempting to do, and that is that this kindergarten and first grade study showed that students who were living in homeless shelters were able to use when they developed executive function skills through this intervention, were able to use those skills to relate to their academic work and actually scored as high as the students who did not come from this difficult environment. And then finally, a very similar study with preschoolers found that those who have developed high levels of executive function skills can mediate some of the expected lower outcomes that might come with difficult family situations, such as low socioeconomic status. And this particular study was measuring math skills. So I wanted to bring you this recent research that I think relates to the topic of play, the topic of how young children learn, how they really learn, devoid of commercial subjectivity. So now we have a clear picture of that. And I'd love to have you ponder this question. So I know I presented you with a question earlier, and that was, or actually it wasn't so much a question as a statement, that our current childcare practices are actually restricting our kids from being able to grow in both cognitive and executive function skills areas, right? And you see what I was getting at with that in terms of all the media time. But now let's turn our attention to discovery toys and examine busy bugs. Those of you who know me know I love busy bugs. And think about how this particular toy can be used, not just in the way that we see the cards and placing the different insects and so on, but thinking about ways it can be used to build maintaining attention, build turn-taking, role-playing, planning, pretend scripting, acting out a pretend script, a created script, and all the other areas that we've talked about in terms of executive functions this evening. And I'm just going to leave you with that idea of how does a game like this, how does an activity like this promote all of those areas that we've just seen the research supporting as being so critical to the essential components of early childhood learning and the way in which children, early childhood, young children learn best. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary. Oh, wrong way. There we go. Turn it over to Mary to collect questions, comments, and I'm here. So
absolutely. So you guys, if you have any questions, I know a couple people have already posted questions for Dr. Bozeday. So go ahead and type in chat. The first question from Chris Beege, why do you think the AAP softened their guidelines?
Oh, okay. I was afraid someone might ask that. So this is my opinion. I want to make this very clear. This is my opinion. I personally believe that the technology industry has very strong lobbying groups that can be extremely influential with organizations with whom they have working relationships. That's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
Okay, so next is actually a comment from Jennifer Kai. She says, my heart just filled with pride knowing that we provide families and schools with these wonderful resources. Heather says, affirmation, this is an affirmation that what we do is important.
I'm going to say not just important, but critical. I'm going to say essential, because our world is flooded with messages that tell us that the electronic learning is just as good, is ubiquitous, is what we should be doing. And we really need to fight that message. And so now you've got a whole bunch of research to do that. So what you're doing is essential and critical. And I'm proud to be a part of this organization for that reason too.
Michelle McConnell says, how do we counter schools using tech in classrooms?
Yes. Well, I will tell you that there is now, this research I presented to you as the early childhood version. I also have an entire stack of research that I present on everything from primary grades through elementary, through middle school, and high school, all the same outcomes. And more and more and more, I think schools are becoming aware of that, the issue with the statement, all tech is good. So frequently when I do a parent presentation, as I did last night, I get the question, well, my goodness, we're giving our kids one-to-one devices. Our entire middle school, our entire high school is using any kind of electronic device that the kids now own by themselves. What are we doing with that? And my answer to that is, we need to be smart about how we use electronic devices in schools. And I'm not talking about preschools, because honestly, I don't think they even belong at the preschool level. I really don't think they belong in kindergarten, first grade. A lot of what's happening is, as adults, we know how dependent we are on technology and how well it serves us. I mean, what we're doing right now is a perfect example. And so we tend to say, oh, because it's such an important part of our lives, and because we use it so much, our kids need it too. But where we fail to understand with that statement is the developmental level of learning. And what really works best for learning, as we've just discussed here with little ones, and then even what works best with middle school kids, which is not a heavy dose of technology, and even the same with high school kids, still not, you don't need everything in tech. So my answer for teachers, if you're ever in that position, or for parents, is, you know what, it's so great that our school/school board has provided these one-to-one devices for our kids. It makes it so much easier for us to use technology when it's appropriate for deeper learning. And it's that last phrase that really should be at the heart of all learning, of all education. And I think if we just keep that phrase in mind, what it says is that technology can provide deeper learning if it's very carefully planned, and it's not always the best way to do that. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a bit longer of an answer.
Yeah, that was fabulous. Polly says, I have been guest teaching at our local schools. I'm amazed at how much computers and Chromebooks are used. The special ed classes are heavily dependent on electronics. So that was her comment.
Yeah. Yes.
Kelly, this is a question. So she's saying, how do we help children over the age of 5 past the peak comprehension stage curve with executive function development?
Well, interestingly, we've done research on kids in the early grades in elementary, middle school, high school, but there's also research elsewhere on similar interventions, I'll call them, executive function interventions, and it's never too late. The good news is, one of our major studies was with high schoolers. We focused on freshmen in high school. They had not had any executive functions training other than the incidental components that came about kind of by chance in their schooling. And their mastery of executive function skills and the way in which it boosted their performance on standardized tests as well as their grade point average was phenomenal. So it is never too late. I've conducted courses on college campuses with college sophomores who frankly were on academic probation, and I knew that it was not because of ability. I knew it was because of executive function skills. Out of a group of 82 over 4 sections, all but 2 of them got off of academic probation in that semester during which I was teaching them. So it's a matter of literally infusing, incorporating the teaching of the executive function skills into the school environment. And of course, this relates so directly to hands-on learning at all levels, beginning, of course, with the little ones, which you guys are so magnificently doing.
Okay, next question. This is from Robin. Is it safe to say that electronics are one of the reasons children have an increase in autism, ADHD, ADD? To me, I see these issues solely from electronics. So that's her comment.
Yeah. So that, okay, I would not make that statement much. But I would say I would exclude autism. In fact, I would say one of the areas that electronic communication can be most helpful in is with kids on the spectrum. There's a magnetism there that is different from some of the other difficulties that kids have. Now, so I'm putting that aside, and that's my own opinion based on my experiences, right? The ADHD component, though, I absolutely believe that we have created a society of ADHD people. We have, because of the pervasiveness of technology, we now, all of us are experiencing something close to addiction. I said it, addiction to our electronic devices. And I say it with confidence because there is recent research. I'm going to cite particularly Adam Adler's new book called Irresistible, in which he studied the brains of addicted gamblers and compared those with the brains of just normal people, when they anticipate getting a text message or an Instagram or a Snapchat, depending on their age, and the brains look exactly the same.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we have created a situation here with overuse of technology, with pervasiveness of technology, where we're all in a state of being distracted, pulled away from a real person and interpersonal communication. And people know this now. Young people know it. There is an attempt now by many people, young folks in their 20s, to put their cell phones aside and engage in real conversation again. I think people are waking up to this. I see schools waking up. I see parents waking up. The more we can get the word out, I think the better.
So I've got a couple more questions. If children, this is from Michelle, if children are already behind due to technology, what advice would you give to get them caught up?
Well, I'm a big believer in, no surprise here, right? I'm working with Discovery Toys, in hands-on learning, in interaction. I'm a big believer in constructing learning around activities that speak to their lives, but also allow for imagination and creativity. Our schools are turning into establishments that teach to test. We've lived through several decades now, almost 2 decades, of emphasis on testing, as if testing is learning. Testing is a way to measure what one has learned in a very shallow way, most testing. So we need to get ourselves out of that idea that is learning and think about what learning for depth of understanding is really about.
Okay, next question is from Ruth, and I'm not quite exactly sure if I'm going to be saying this right. So she says, how do you train on EFV skills or EF skills to older kids?
So executive function skills?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Was that Ruth? Ruth, you're speaking my language here. So you basically work the same way you will with younger kids. You just infuse it into the high school, into the college. We've developed curriculum that goes all the way through and is tremendously successful. But the secret is, honestly, it's much better, much more effective if the school takes it on within their content areas. Initially, when we started this work about 12 years ago in executive function skills curriculum, we thought that it would be just ideal to have a class within the school that was devoted to executive functions, much like a support staff might, when they spend time with the child, work on executive function skills, which has been the case for many, many years, ever since support services came into being. But we found out pretty quickly that while that's good, it's helpful, it's not nearly as effective as when the classroom teachers, the subject area teachers for older kids, take executive function skills into their everyday content areas in teaching. That's where you really get that carryover and that established ability to use executive function skills. And by the way, for those of you who are parents as well as wonderful educational consultants, parents can do the same thing as they demonstrate the way in which they're using executive function skills, the way in which they're using, if you want to return to Discovery Toys, the way in which they are interacting with those kinds of those toys and those kinds of manipulatives with their kids too. So it's not a question of age. It's really more a question of approaching learning. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. Well, I just had a few more comments. Nancy says, thank you for your comments on autism. I was thinking exactly what you were saying. Smart boards and iPads are engaging tools that I've found success in teaching skills that can't be acquired through play due to deficits.
Right.
Rhonda says, I've seen firsthand how Discovery Toys have helped children. Elizabeth, this is a long one. So my grandson is missing a major nerve in the middle of his brain, so that controls a lot of his knowledge. I'm glad that I have Discovery Toys in his life. I'm just going to stop right there because it's long. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Tammy just said, I believe it's all about engaging our children. That's absolutely true. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. We are about at the top of the hour. Jim Garber, do you want to come off and wrap us up? Or Jim Myers? I know you haven't had a chance to speak before we wrap up today.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Bozeday. That was extremely insightful. And it's always, I think, great for all of us in our community to, constantly reflect and to appreciate the value we do add to our children's lives and the lives of families across North America, and to the importance, Dr. Bozeday, you pointed out, of what we do and what we offer, and to never shy away from that.
Right.
Continue to, to preach the message that our children are in trouble, but we do offer an opportunity to help our children, to help our parents and our educators to deal with some of these challenges in today's world.
Right. Great. I couldn't agree more, obviously.
Thank you, Dr. Bozeday. We appreciate your time and appreciate your relationship with Discovery Toys, and we're always glad to see you. And thank you again for spending time with us and sharing your message. It's very, very important. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you for letting me be a part of this fantastic organization. And, I just want everybody there to realize what an important job you have and how more than ever now, I think the work that you're doing dovetails with the research that we see is so important for early childhood learning. So keep it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, this recording will be posted tomorrow morning once I start work. So look for it then. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you again, Dr. Bozeday. We appreciate you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Okay, good night, everyone. Bye-bye.